and welcome to your show, Medford Happenings, a show for and about the city of Medford. I am John Petrella. The purpose of this program is to give Medford citizens facts and information to help you make informed choices. And today we want to welcome our guest, attorney Nick Giurleo, to Medford Happenings. Welcome, Nick. Glad to have you on the show.
Hi, John. Thanks for having me here.
So first and foremost, I want to thank Nick on his announcement that he is a candidate for our Medford City Council. And I have no doubt that he will do an outstanding job for our city. So we'll get right into the questions. Okay, Nick, we're going to start off by can you give us some background information? Who is Nick Giurleo?
Sure. So, John, I've lived my whole life in Medford. I grew up here from a hardworking family, Italian-American family. I went through the Medford Public Schools. I attended the Brooks for elementary, then the McGlynn for middle, and then I went to Medford High. At Medford High, I really focused on academics, so I studied hard, and I was fortunate enough to graduate number one in my class. After that, I decided I would go on to college, so I attended Tufts University. When I was at Tufts, I studied history and I studied international relations. I also did a minor in Italian. Graduated from Tufts, magna cum laude, and then went on to attend law school at Boston College Law. And there I had really excellent professors and a really great course of study. A lot of it was focused on municipal law and zoning and land use. I also had some clinical experience too. I worked for a while as a prosecutor with Malden District Court. And after that, I graduated from law school and I took the bar exam. I passed on the first go and I became a lawyer. And that's essentially what I do today. I've worked in criminal law a little bit. I worked for a law office in Medford Square for a while. And today I'm with a law firm in downtown Boston on State Street. It does primarily medical malpractice. In court all the time, defending, prosecuting cases for people who are injured by doctors.
Very nice. Great background. Highly qualified, I would say, so that's always a good thing. Great background. So I guess a lot of people would wonder why is Nick running for Medford City Council? And, what reasons are making you want to run for the job?
It's a good question, and I feel like the people who are considering voting for me, they should get an explanation for that, because I think it's important to understand why somebody is running for elected office.
Yep.
So it's hard to summarize it in a few words, but to say it in a few words, or at least attempt to, I would say it's because I really do care about Medford. I love Medford. I've lived here my whole life. And I want to do, I think, what's best for Medford. I'm really just passionate about this community, and I feel like it has so much potential. I feel like a lot of it is untapped potential, so potential we could actualize. So that's a big part of it. And also, I've just been unhappy, I would say, with the way things have been going with city leadership. And I feel like we could be doing better. And I feel like I might have the qualifications to improve what's been going on in our city. Qualifications primarily, I'd say, for my education, just the fact that I've done a lot of school and I'm a lawyer, and I think being a member of any sort of elected body, you need to have kind of skills like that a lawyer might have. So I'd say all of that overall has kind of motivated me to run. And for me, it's very important, it's easy to complain and say, I don't like the way things are going. But then we complain and we don't take action.
There you go.
So for me,
yeah,
I've said to myself, it's time to stop complaining and time to do something about that.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm throwing my hat in.
Yeah. That happens a lot of complaining, but you got to offer solutions too. Okay, so myself personally, I think there's a lot of issues right now, major issues. Concerning Medford. Are there any, what would you consider major issues right now regarding the city of Medford? What are things that you see?
I like what you said at the beginning, that there are a lot of issues.
Yes, there is.
I mean, we could sit here all day and talk.
Right.
But obviously we can't do that, so let's just talk about, I think, what are the major issues, just like you asked. So
Yep.
For me, I would say that number one issue is probably affordability at the moment. We're seeing on the national level, just an issue of cost of living, right? It's just becoming very expensive to live anywhere, but especially in suburban communities near big successful cities like Medford. It's just becoming really expensive to live in Medford. And I think there are various reasons why that's the case. So for me, I want to do something about the situation with affordability in our city. I feel like people are very worried and concerned. How am I going to afford to stay in the home that I've lived in, or my family's lived in, for all our lives? So what can we do about that? How can we make this city an affordable place to live? I would say the next issue in terms of importance would probably be, and I think it's related to affordability, but
Yes.
economic growth. We're seeing a Medford, I think, that's stagnating a bit when it comes to economic development. So for me, this is something I want to address. What can we do to make our city more prosperous? What can we do to make our city wealthier, and a wealth that everybody can have a part in? So what can we do to bring businesses to Medford, for example? What can we do to promote growth? So hopefully that's something I would be able to address, if I were elected. And I would say, just maybe as a third one, just to kind of wrap up, what are the major issues here?
Yep.
I'd probably say it's transparency. I think we're seeing a significant problem with that currently. I think people feel left out. People feel like they don't understand what's happening at City Hall. People feel worried about this, concerned, maybe angry, upset. And I feel like information has been hard to get in a lot of circumstances. So I think transparency needs to be addressed. I think we need a counselor who is going to address that.
I agree with you. I mean, really, good answer. The transparency, especially, I just feel like a lot of people feel like they're being left out. And I know I've seen you go to City Hall. I've seen a lot of people go up there and speak. And it just seems like no one's paying attention. No one's listening. So I think transparency is something that's a really key. And I want to thank you for that answer. So here's another good one for you. We just had the ballot questions. How did you feel about that? I mean, what was your position on the overrides? I mean, plain and simple. What did you feel? How did you feel about it?
Sure. So for anyone who was following my speeches at City Council or maybe read my op-ed in the Tufts Daily, it's no secret that I was very opposed to all three ballot questions that we were presented with in November. So I really kind of made it a point to be outspoken about that because I was deeply concerned about what I was seeing. So for anyone maybe not familiar, I'll just briefly recap them. There were three. The first one was $3.5 million for schools and DPW. This would be an override, Proposition 2.5 override. This is a state law that allows taxes to be raised over a certain cap in a given fiscal year. Question 7 was a $4 million one for schools, and then question 8 was slightly different. It was called a debt exclusion, essentially a bond, $30 million for a new fire station. So
Right.
These were the three questions Medford voters had to decide upon for the next election. So the reason why I was opposed, I had various reasons. The most important, I think, was just the burden this would have on residents. This would essentially be a massive tax hike that would really hurt people who are already struggling. I talked about affordability at the beginning.
Right. Yep.
This was, I think, a major contributor to the affordability problems we're seeing today. This idea of, anytime we have a problem in the city, let's just raise taxes. That more money thrown at a problem fixes it, which I think there's misperceptions about that. So the tax impact was a big part of my opposition. And I also think there was a lot of kind of fear-mongering that came behind putting these questions forward, what I'd call maybe scare tactics, that I don't think was supported by data at all. I can give you a specific example of that. I mean, there was talk of, teacher salaries, for example. Our teacher salaries won't be competitive, but according to the Department of Education data, Medford salaries for teachers are competitive compared to elsewhere in the state.
Yes.
And this is data anyone can look up.
Right. Yep.
There was also just a vagueness, too, in terms of what is this money going to be used for specifically. We got general categories like schools, DPW.
Right.
fire station, but specifically, where was this money going to go? For me, I think for voters, they should be entitled to know in a line item manner where money is going to go specifically. So the fact that it was vague, was another reason I felt like I couldn't support. And then another thing that just cannot be passed aside is just the free cash that we have.
Yes, quite a bit.
Quite a bit. It's gone up since the election.
Yes. Funny how that happened.
At the time, we had about $25 million, according to the Department of Revenue. But like I said, that's since gone up. And anyone who doesn't know what free cash is, obviously it's not free. It does come from taxpayers, but it's essentially over-budgeted money in a given fiscal year that goes into a reserve fund that we're able to use for a very broad range of purposes once it's certified. So we heard a lot of talk during the override campaign. Oh, we can't use money. We can't use free cash, rather, to meet, for example, school expenses. But, what did I see at a recent city council meeting? The mayor requested $5 million to repair deficient HVAC and the roofs at the middle schools. So $5 million that could have been used and is going to be used to fund that.
Right.
Right. And then that same day, there was another request for $200,000 for security upgrades across the schools. So it really was misleading for people to say that free cash was just off the table completely.
Right. I hear you. Yep.
And then just kind of to wrap this up, I would say growth, right, was another alternative to raising taxes, right? If we're increasing the commercial tax base, for example, we're getting more revenue, right? And we can use that to meet funding shortages. So we ignored new growth as well as an alternative to the overrides.
Right.
And then there's you have to think also just of the diversity of our city, economic diversity of our city. What happens when taxes go up? Well, it drives out lower income people. It essentially gentrifies the city.
Yes.
So if you're concerned about gentrification, supporting tax hikes doesn't solve that problem. So we have to think of that. We have to think of how lower income, middle income people are going to be affected by tax hikes.
Yeah.
Especially people on fixed incomes too. You got to think of seniors, right?
Right. Yeah.
Who are really struggling and barely getting by in a lot of circumstances.
Yeah.
People with disabilities as well.
Right. Yeah. Most affected. I think those are the people that are most affected by that. Zoning. There's so much going on with the zoning. And, we could probably, I know you could discuss that subject for hours, but we don't have hours. So I want to sort of be more specific on it. We're all hearing about Medford Square now. We're hearing Salem Street, South Medford, West Medford. We know there's a lot going on. Another situation, I don't think people are being heard. But what's your opinion? I mean, how do you feel about Medford Square? What are the plans? What do you see happening with that? What do you think about it? What's your opinion?
Yeah, so another great question. I'll go back to what I said again earlier, this idea of untapped potential, right? Medford is a city that could be much better in a lot of ways. It's great now in a lot of respects, but there's so much more we could be doing. So for anyone not familiar, recently it was announced that there'll be a very big development project coming to Medford Square. Essentially 3 city-owned lots. They're going to be transformed, a combination of mixed-use retail and residential. And nobody's denying this is going to fundamentally transform the square in terms of the way it looks, in terms of the way it's structured, who's living there, who's doing business there. So I'd say it's quite early. This proposal was only announced very recently. So I think I would need more information to form a definite opinion yet on where I stand on the proposal itself.
Right.
But before I talk about maybe the questions I have regarding that proposal, I'll first say I think it's super important that we all dial in on the need to revitalize Medford Square. As a guy who's studied a lot of history, Medford Square in the past used to be a very different place. And I'm not talking like 100 years ago, and
no,
it was.
You're not.
But in decades past, it was a very different place. It was much more livelier and more of a kind of gathering spot for the people of our city. But now it's in very rough shape in a lot of respects. And there have been improvements, but not enough. And you have to look also, I always say this to people, you have to look at our neighboring squares and compare them to Medford Square. Think of Davis Square, for example, Central Square in Cambridge, Harvard Square in Cambridge,
right?
Kendall. I mean, I could go on and on.
Yes, you can.
Do all of these resemble Medford Square? No. These squares, you have a lot of traffic, a lot of activity. They're booming in a lot of respects. But then you look at Medford Square, where I know people who live the next town over, who move here from other places and don't even know there's such a thing as Medford Square, because there's so few reasons in a lot of respects
Right.
to go, because it's difficult to park. The traffic is horrendous sometimes. So what can we do to support our local businesses there? They're awesome. They're great. I love spending my money there. I'd much rather spend my money there than at the big brand name shops.
I agree.
What
Yep.
can we do to improve them, right? And bring traffic to them, business to them. For me, like I said, it's the parking and the traffic. I think a lack of access by public transit is also an issue too.
Yes. Yep.
Right? I think there's just bus routes at the moment, right?
Yep.
What are the other ways we can get people to the square?
Yeah.
But then I guess just turning to the proposal itself, like I said, I think it's still early to form a conclusive opinion
Okay.
on it. But there are questions that I have, and I'm just going to go through a few of them that I have. So, for example, referring to the businesses here, how will this proposal affect the businesses that are already there? That's something to think about.
Right.
Parking, of course. We always have to be thinking about parking with any
Yes.
project. We can't ignore parking, period. And then another important thing is, if you look at the map, where is this going to be? This is going to be right next to the senior center in Medford Square, right? So how is this going to impact the senior center? Is it going to pose any safety concerns, for example? Accessibility concerns to the senior center? So seniors who regularly frequent the senior center, they're major stakeholders in this. We have to talk to them. We have to make sure their opinions
Yes.
are heard on this project. And then also we just have to think, how will it look? I mean, the aesthetic impact, right? You got to think about how old these buildings are in Medford Square, with this big new modern towering structure, fit with the buildings that are already there. Obviously, when it comes to looks, we tend to put that lower in our list of priorities, but it's still something to think about. We want our
Right.
community to be beautiful, too.
Yep.
So those are the questions I have. Overall, my suggestion to the people who are involved with this would be not to rush this process. I think we need to slow down, and we need to get adequate community input. And one of the things we need to do is not just take community input, but actually actively change our plans based on what people have to say.
That's was going to be part of my next question, and you mentioned it earlier. You just mentioned it again. I can't tell you how many people I know, and I do know a lot of people. I've been here most of my life. They have concerns, and they just feel like they're just not being addressed. That's how they feel. That's the perception out there. What can you do, or is there anything? Is there a way, or how do you feel about that? I mean, addressing people's concerns, like they don't feel like they're being heard. Any solutions? Anything you can offer for that?
Absolutely. And like I said at the beginning, this is a major aspect of my campaign here is I want to improve transparency in our city.
Okay.
And I'd say I'm included among these people who do feel left out in a lot
Right.
of ways.
Yep.
I think it's something many of us share. So for me, I think we're seeing a lot of ways to try to reduce the ability of the public to participate, right? For the purposes of, I guess you could call it expediency, trying to rush things through and promote an agenda. But we have to look at the ways, number one, in which public participation was being reduced. So I can give you some very specific examples of that. We saw a resolution last year to reduce the amount of time by several minutes in which people can participate in public comment at city council meetings. This is terrible, right? Because we're now in a position where people go up and they have to rush and say everything they have to say. I think it's currently at 3 minutes, very, very fast. And they often forget things, and sometimes there's pressure from the the president of the council to immediately wrap up once that 3 minutes is reached. It's not like he says, oh, you can have a little more time. Most of the time, that's what's happening. We're seeing also just the meetings, how late that they're going. Many of them are going far past midnight. And you think of people who have to work the next day. Maybe they have to go to school or take care of children, or there's all these different reasons why, a meeting running really late is not a good thing. So I think we have to look at ways we can try to make it so we don't have that problem. But we're also seeing some kind of procedural sneakiness too, with, for example, sticking controversial things at the very end of the agenda so that we don't get to them till midnight,
Yeah.
1 a.m. I mean, there was a resolution against anti-Semitism before the council recently. We didn't get to that until very, very late in the evening. But that's such a huge community issue. It's something.
Right.
Why are we not considering that
Addressing
earlier?
it,
And
yep.
in any event, it was tabled, so no one had a chance to say anything about it.
I remember that. Yeah.
I can remember also a recent meeting in which we were talking about the charter, and the charter was on the agenda along with other things that merited time, but weren't as pressing as getting the charter to Beacon Hill. So what ended up happening was one of the counselors moved to take it out of order and didn't even receive a second to do that. That's just horrendous. I mean, for anyone who doesn't know what that means, like a second, you're not saying you approve.
Right.
You're just saying, I'm willing to have the discussion on this now. And they wouldn't even do that. It's just horrendous, in my opinion. And then immediately after that, someone else proposed a motion to take something else out of order. Sorry, a motion. And that was approved without question. So it's really just insane, a lot of the things that have been happening.
Yes.
So for me, I want to do things like change the rules to allow the public more opportunities to participate and do something about these like midnight 1 a.m. meetings to try
Right. Yep.
Everyone should have a chance to come to these meetings and say what they think. They shouldn't have to wait hours and hours and hours to talk for 3 minutes.
Okay.
It's just not right.
No, that's all truth, and it all makes sense. I'm going to be a little redundant here. Your knowledge, your experience, and I think your approach, what you could bring to the city council, it's very valuable. But anyhow, how do you bring this to the city council, and how do you deliver better outcomes? You definitely have everything it takes. How do you deliver it,
That is the question, I would say. It's so easy to make promises, but the hardest
Right.
part is delivering on them. And this is something I'm thinking about now,
Right.
If I'm fortunate enough to get elected, it's something I should be thinking about from day one. How am I going to make these things I want to change happen? So for me, I think the most important facet of it is listening to residents. What are residents thinking and feeling, and not just pushing them to the side. We have our opinions and beliefs, and we should definitely stick to our principles. But at the same time, as an elected leader, there's some who say, you're elected to make decisions, and that's not false. But as an elected representative, you are an agent of the people who vote you in. I think of as being a lawyer. I mean, what's my job is to represent a client.
Right.
My judgment's entrusted to make decisions for the client, especially legal decisions where there's a knowledge gap. But at the same time, I'm working for the client. The client isn't working for me. And the same thing is true with, I think, being elected representative is you have to do what the people want. So listening is a big part of making
Right.
things happen.
Yep.
And then it's just, of course, just common things like hard work, for
Right.
example. It
Yep.
requires hard work and not
Yep.
laziness. It requires prudence, being smart and listening and learning, teaching. And it's always good to admit when you don't know something.
Right.
And do the homework and research,
Yep.
right? We have a lot of, I think, elected leaders, not just in Medford, but everywhere, who say, I know what to do, right? They kind of jump to conclusions about things, and they don't take a step back and say, well,
Yep.
maybe I should reevaluate my own perspective. Maybe it's wrong in certain respects. What can I do to make it better?
Right. In other words, you got to represent all the people.
Exactly.
You got to do your best to represent all. You're not going to make everyone happy, but you got to represent them all. All right. So now we're going to get down to our last question, I'm going to ask you this: if someone wants to get in touch with Nick Giurleo, how would they go about? How do they do it? How do they get in touch with you, Nick? Where do you go?
Yeah. So I think there's kind of two ways to talk about it. Number one is like literally, how do you get in touch with me, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
I live here in Medford, obviously. I like to go to events.
Right.
I do have some social media pages for the campaign. So I have a Facebook,
Okay.
Nick Giurleo for Medford City Council. I also have an Instagram at Nick G for the number 4 Medford.
Okay.
So I've been posting regularly about what I've been doing and who I've been talking to on the social
Right.
media. So if you have social media, feel free to take a look.
Yep.
Of course, anyone who wants to just talk with me, feel free to just find me, reach out to me, give me a call, send me a text, ask to meet for coffee. I'm happy, honestly.
Right. Yep.
Busy guy between what I do for a living and campaign activities, but I'm going to make
Yes.
time for everybody. Even people who don't agree with me, I encourage us to have conversations. right? Let's talk. Let's try to iron out, what we don't agree upon.
Right.
Because that's how it works. That's how you get things done, is you cooperate. But in terms of just the other kind of aspect of your question, I'd say is, where can you find me? Like, what do I like to do in Medford? I love Medford. I honestly do, and that's why I'm running. Number one place you'd probably find me is probably the library, right?
Okay.
I love the Medford Public Library, all the services it provides, just the space it offers for people who are interested in learning. And I'm a guy who just loves to learn. I love to read. So I like to go there a lot, hang out in the local history room, look at the yearbooks, look at the old historical documents, and just learn about
There's
Medford.
a lot of them,
How great a city it is. Also love being outdoors, enjoying the many beautiful things that Medford has to offer, like the Fells, Brooks Estate, Mystic Lakes, Mystic River. Always like being outdoors. You want to go to the hike? You want to go on a hike with me? Feel free. Let's go on a hike. Talk politics and hike, or just enjoy the beauty of nature.
That would
too.
be
That's
interesting. Yeah, I hear you.
And then I can't not say also, like, I just love going to Medford businesses as well. I love going to the square.
Yep.
Having lunch there, brunch, wherever it is in Medford. Just love spending my money in my hometown.
Yeah, I agree. And there's a lot of Medford Square, especially. Actually, the whole city, but Medford Square. I mean, there's a lot of great restaurants. There is. I mean, there's a lot of good food.
We know how to eat.
Yeah,
we know how to eat in the city.
We're Italians, of course we do.
Well, everybody in this, regardless of ethnic background, we know how to eat in Medford.
Yeah, we do. I agree. Anyhow, I want to thank you, Nick, for joining us on Medford Happenings. And I want to thank you for being a candidate. I think it's so important to have people like you run for council, school committee, whatever the position is. I think it's a good thing for Medford. So I want to thank you. And I enjoyed the show. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you're going to come back and join us again.
It was great. Thank you very much for having me here.
Yeah, no, it was our pleasure. So I want to thank everyone. I want to take a minute, thank everyone who has been watching the show. I want to thank you for your feedback, whether it's been positive or negative. We take it all. And if you would like to share any comments, you have any suggestions for a show, or appearing on a future show, you can contact us at John Petrella, that's my name, 55 at gmail.com. And you're also going to be able to see replays of this show on medfordtv.org. And you can also see Medford Happenings on YouTube and Facebook as well. So from all of us at Medford Happenings, I'm John Petrella. And remember, stay informed. Thank you. Ta-da!